Sarah, can you talk about how you came to this project and maybe elaborate more on how it came to be that Sound of Music was being performed in Mumbai?
Yeah, sure. So I heard about the project through my producer, Joe Walters. He conducts for the Bombay Chamber Orchestra sometimes, and he was always kind of at me to make a film about this orchestra. And I just thought that sounded really boring, and I was just like, go away, Joe, go away, leave me alone. But he was very persistent, and he was kind of emailing me and calling me about concerts coming up with this Indian orchestra. And one day there was this concert. You know, they were collaborating with a choir of kids who came from the slums, and they were putting on a concert of songs from the Sound of Music, and that kind of really piqued my interest. And the first thing that kind of really sparked in my mind was just the idea of hearing these iconic songs that make you think of, you know, wide open green space and mountains and rivers and lakes, and getting very kind of claustrophobic imagery of slums. And I thought that would be quite a kind of interesting disconnect for your brain to try and make sense of through the film. And so we went out to Mumbai and met all the kids, and you know, I fell instantly in love with all of them, and they could all speak English, so you could have sort of real relationships with them, which was kind of extraordinary. And yeah, I just couldn't resist. It was the most extraordinary experience, it really was.
Michael, I wonder, when you watch the film, just as a casual observer of it, albeit someone who really understands its music well, how do you respond to the film? What were your impressions of it?
It's one of the most moving experiences I've ever had watching this documentary, because it's so filled with such extraordinary humanity, and of course it makes us all realize how connected we are in the world, and how these children's lives could have been our lives by some stroke of fate or karma. And the recognition that this music by Rodgers and Hammerstein, which was something created for commerce, created for Broadway, then becoming a film, has had a ripple effect on millions of lives, and these children's lives, in a way that Rodgers and Hammerstein never could have possibly dreamt. And it shows, again, the extraordinary power of how music can transform and change lives and give us dreams when we sometimes don't have them otherwise.
So Sarah, it's a huge effort to go to Mumbai and capture this story, and then there's another huge effort as a filmmaker to work with such iconic music as the Sound of Music, which they probably don't give away for free. But what was it like to approach the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization to say, hey, I've just been to India and I filmed these kids, and can you work with me?
Rodgers and Hammerstein actually completely saved the film at one point, or at various points really. But while we were out there, Ginny, I think it was the night before the concert, was like, okay, we've licensed this score from Rodgers and Hammerstein, and we've just found a line in our contract that says we're not allowed to film the performance. And so you have until tomorrow to clear it with Rodgers and Hammerstein in New York. I want an email from the person that I've been speaking to, their head of legal, by tomorrow, or you can't film the concert. And you can imagine the panic. It's like 9 weeks of filming about to come to nothing. And so I did the most insane ring around on a rooftop in Mumbai at midnight, just calling everyone I knew that had any kind of contacts in New York. This was pre-HBO. Sheila, I would have called you if I knew you, but I didn't know you then. And I managed to get Victoria Traub, who's the head of legal at Rodgers and Hammerstein, on the phone, and I'd probably had about 3 Kingfisher beers by this point just to deal with the stress, and I might have sounded a little bit unhinged, but she was very helpful, and she was like, totally fine, I'll just email them, and that was the start of the conversation. And it was a long conversation, and it was pretty epic. It was about 9 months of conversation to clear everything. It's the biggest clearance of Rodgers and Hammerstein music, I think, in a documentary film or any film ever, which is pretty extraordinary. But the Rodgers and Hammerstein estate have been fantastic, completely fantastic. And it's so helpful, with this screening, and we're still kind of talking to them. But Fink, who is the kind of head of Rodgers and Hammerstein, knows everything about the Sound of Music, is being extraordinarily helpful.
Michael, I wonder, of that songbook, what are your favorite songs? Do you have favorite songs in the Sound of Music catalog, and what do different ones mean to you?
First of all, I started playing the piano when I was 5 with both hands. And I'm telling you that because the very first song that I played on the piano was Do Re Mi from, obviously, The Sound of Music. It was before the film was made, but we had the cast album because that was in the days when all families had cast albums, not just gay people. And I had listened to that album so many times that, and I could play by ear, and I sat down and played that. So that song is very significant to me. Edelweiss always moves me to tears every time I hear it. And it's impossible not to think of Elaine Stritch when you hear something good. So those are my 3 faves.
I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about Rodgers and Hammerstein, who they were as people to create this music. I mean, you mentioned before that Hammerstein was writing a lot of this while he was ill. What was their backgrounds that helped them invent this incredible music?
As people, Stephen Sondheim said very famously something that's been oft quoted about their personalities being such different men. He said that Oscar Hammerstein was a man of infinite soul and limited talent, and Richard Rodgers was a man of infinite talent and limited soul. Because Rodgers was considered to be a tough man, but this music flowed out of him so extraordinarily, such endless inspiration that at the end of his life he was able to create melodies that were just as inspired as the first ones he had written in the early 20s. And it was the combination of the two of them with such disparate points of view of life, but a shared point of view about theater and musical theater and what it could bring to people. And the innovation that they both created, first with Oklahoma and then with subsequent shows. It is said that Hammerstein was much more of an idealist and Rodgers was more of a businessman, but the inspiration that comes through in his music shows a side of his soul that was more resonant with Hammerstein, I think, than people realize.
Sarah, but we just have a little bit of time left, but I wonder if you can tell us what's next. You talked about how you're trying to use this film to bring more attention and indeed raise money to support the education of the students in the school. Can you elaborate on what's happening with that?
Sure. So basically, we're trying to fulfill some of the expectations that the concert kind of raised, but maybe didn't fulfill. And so I'm working really closely with lots of charities with an existing interest in education in India, the American India Foundation and Akanksha and Pratham and Magic Bus and all sorts, to have fundraising screenings. And we have this fund housed in India called the Muktangan Fast Track Fund, and its first goal is to raise enough money to put the entirety of Ashish's graduating class through further education. And we've got kind of provisions in there for textbooks and catch-up tutors and stationery and travel and all of that kind of thing. So when, Ashish gets to an age where he can go on and study to become a doctor or a scientist, he's gonna get the chance to do so. Because, what kind of kills me is the thought that that hopefulness and that drive and that commitment that you see in Ashish will one day go away. That he will one day kind of wake up and realize, actually, the odds are massively stacked against me. These mountains in the way of my dreams are too big. And he will lose that spark. And the idea of that moment destroys me. And so we're doing everything that we can to kind of leverage the film to help Ashish and all of his friends. And I'm working really closely with the school, who, I go out to India a couple of times a year, but they're there all day, every day. And they're very keen for us to sort of, raise money to help the whole of Ashish's class, not just Ashish. Because I know, if you're anything like me, you just kind of want to scoop him up and get him out as quickly as you can. But, you can't. can kind of blunder into a situation like that with your very Western sensibilities and with the best of intentions make a situation worse. And what's most important for Ashish and all of his friends is that their kind of social network is maintained. And Ashish did get a little ego on him, and and continues to be honest. Like whenever we Skype or whenever I chat with him, it's very much about stop showing off Ashish, stop lauding the film, stop lauding the concert over your friends. And you know, his friends are what's going to get him through this much more than any concert or any film. So it's very important to preserve that while raising money to continue to fund his and all of his friends' education.
And if people want to help or track the progress, where do they go? The film's website?
Yeah, you can, it'd be wonderful if you could all donate. The website is www.thesoundofmumbai.org, and there's a kind of link through to donate.
I'm so happy that you brought this film to us. I'm so happy to have your insights into Rodgers and Hammerstein. I thank you both for coming. Thank you very much.